Hello friends, welcome back to another Commander Dive. We did a community vote to see who was going to be featured today. Let's get into those results. I'm Adam, and this is Commander Tax. So I tallied the votes, and there was 13 total votes, and the winner was, drumroll please, Kona, Rescue Beastie, with 69% of votes. Yes, that's just a coincidence. A total of 9 votes, and he beats out Loot and Gyred to be our featured commander for the deck today. So who is Kona? Well, Kona is a 3 and a green for a Beast Survivor. It's a 4/3, and it has Survival. At the beginning of your second main phase, if Kona, Rescue Beastie, is tapped, you may put a permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield. So this is all about big green things, right? So we have lots of enablers to actually tap Kona so that he doesn't necessarily have to swing in, and we can get a trigger as soon as he comes onto the battlefield. We have a ton of ramp, so if Kona isn't there, we can still play our stuff, and we have some random other things that we are going to take a look at. Let's get into that first category, which is
Tap Kona.
Now we're going to run through several cards here that are going to allow us to tap Kona and get a trigger on his survival without actually having to attack with him. The first card up here is Springleaf Drum. This is just 1 generic mana for an artifact that reads, tap this to tap an untapped creature you control, add 1 mana of any color. The ramp of this is nice, but really we're just using this to allow us to tap Kona in our first main phase. Then we go through our combat phase without having to attack, and then again, we're going to get that triggered ability for survival and allow us to play something big. The next card is very similar in that it's Relic of Legends. This is normally reserved for Legends Matter decks. However, it's really clever here. It's a 3 generic cost artifact that says you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color, but you can also tap an untapped legendary creature you control and you add 1 mana of any color. So we can tap Kona and we can tap this, and then you're going to get 2 mana of any color. In this case, it's just green. We don't need any color, obviously, but this just allows us to tap Kona. Next up, we have Enduring Vitality. This is a new Duskmourne card. It's 1 and 2 green pips for an Elk Glimmer that's 3/3 with Vigilance, so a decent little body on it as well. And it says creatures you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color. So this one's going to be dependent on Kona being on the battlefield, and then this can then be played the next turn, and then you can tap Kona right then, because you can't tap a creature that has Summoning Sickness. So, but this also has a really cool effect that when it dies, if it was a creature you return to the battlefield under its owner's control, it's an enchantment. So it's really hard to get rid of. All of these Enduring Cycle cards are really hard to get rid of. Moving on, I love this card. It's Tyvar the Pummeler. It's 1 and 2 green pips for an Elf Warrior 3/3. And it says tap another untapped creature you control, and Tyvar gains Indestructible. So this gives some staying power to Tyvar, and then you have to tap Tyvar himself. But really what's cool about this is not only does it give us the ability to tap at instant speed our Kona, but also he has, you pay 3 and 2 green pips, and a creature you control gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. So even if you just have Tyvar and Kona on the battlefield, everything's, you activate this and everything would get +4/+4. So you'd have a 7/7 and an 8/7. Those are big creatures. This could be a really good finisher. All right, next up we have a land. I don't talk about lands enough. This is a really cool land for this deck, so I'm going to share it here. It's the Shire, of course, from Lord of the Rings. And it says it enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a legendary creature. So if you have Kona out, this will come in untapped, and then you can pay, you can just tap it to add green mana, but then you can pay 1 and a green and tap it to tap an untapped creature you control and create a food token. The food token's just a bonus, but it allows us to tap Kona and then get the trigger that we want. And it's on a land, which is really great because it's not going to take up a slot in our deck. Next up, we have a new card from MH3. This is Ella Domri Corvectal. It's 1 and 2 green pips for an Elf Warrior 3/3. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. That's a really cool ability, but then it also says you may cast creatures spells from the top of your library. So you can just play stuff right off the top. So it's kind of like Impulse Draw in a way. Gives us access to 1 more card, like your hand has 8 cards in it. But the reason it's in this deck is it's pay 1 green, you tap this, and tap 2 untapped creatures you control. So you actually have to have a second creature for this one, but the rest of the card really justifies its position in this deck. It says reveal a card from your hand or the top of your library. If you reveal a creature card this way, put it onto the battlefield, activate only during your turn. So this can also cheat us out something really big in a very similar way that Kona does. Just this is actually a little bit worse, I think, in some ways. Now we have Cryptolith Right. It's an enchantment. It costs 1 and a green, and it says creatures you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Again, we don't care about any color. This is the mono green deck. However, just having that ability to tap Kona and then putting it on an enchantment, enchantments are pretty hard to remove. So just another enduring vitality, just a similar effect to that, and just another way to ramp us out to play some of these bigger cards that we're going to talk about later. That's the end of that category. Let's go ahead and move on to
Mana Multipliers.
So this category is all about multiplying our mana so that we can play some of this big stuff if we can't keep Kona on the battlefield. So the first card here is Selvala, Heart of the Wilds. Is 1 and 2 green pips. For an elf scout, it's a 2/3, and it says whenever another creature enters the battlefield, its controller may draw a card if its power is greater than each other creature's power. So this is going to be a card draw engine on top of it, but if this sticks on the field, you can then pay 1 and tap it to add X mana in any combination of colors. It's all going to be green here, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. So we have some, I think, 10/10s in this deck. So adding 10 green mana is going to allow us to play a couple big things. It's going to be a replacement effect for Kona. Now we have Growing Rights of Itlamok. This is your Gaia's Cradle replacement because nobody has money for that kind of card. It's 2 and a green for a legendary enchantment, and it reads, when it enters, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. At the beginning of your end step, if you control 4 or more creatures, transform this, and then it's basically a Gaia's Cradle on the back. Moving on, now we have Fanatic of Ronus. This is 1 and a green, and normally it's a mana dork that just taps for 1. But if you have a creature that it has 4 or more power, it actually taps for 4 green mana. So, and it's got a 1/4 body on it for 2 mana. This is an awesome card. I love this card. And then if it dies, you can eternalize it, which is 2 and 2 green pips, which means you exile a card from your graveyard, and then this comes back as a 4/4 black zombie snake druid with no mana cost. And you eternalize as a sorcery, which means that you can bring this back from your graveyard, and because it's power 4, now it's automatically going to tap for 4 mana. This is a powerhouse of a card. All right, now we have a very similar card. This is Incubation Druid. It's 1 and a green, and it says tap it to add 1 mana of any color that a land you control could produce. So it's green, obviously. If Incubation Druid has a 1/1 counter on it, add 3 mana of that type instead. So this can tap for 3 mana, and you can pay 5 to adapt it for 3, which means you're going to put 3 1/1 counters on it. So you pay 5, and then from that point on, now it taps for 3 mana instead of 1. A just really strong card. Not as good as Fanatic of Ronus, but having another effect like that is really good. All right, now we have an infamous card here. This is Nyx Bloom Ancient. It is 4 and 3 green pips, so a 7 CMC elemental 5/5 with trample. If you tap a permanent for mana, it produces 3 times as much of that mana instead. So having this where you can get triple the mana is going to be really awesome. It's just a matter of having 7 mana to actually play this out, and then being able to make use of all that mana. All right, now we have another card very similar. Again, 5 and 2 green pips, so 7 CMC again, but it's got a sorcery on it. It's got the adventure. It's just 1 green mana. It says return target creature or land card from your graveyard to your hand. So this allows you to bring something back. But then it says on the right side, when you pay the 7, if you tap a basic land for mana, it produces 3 times as much of that mana instead. And that is it for that category. Let's move on to the next one.
Draw.
All right, this deck's not doing a whole lot of complicated things. It's really just about playing big creatures. One of the things that we need to have is lots of draw. So let's look at our draw category. The first card here is Up the Beanstalk. This is just 1 and a green. I love this card. It's an enchantment that says when Up the Beanstalk enters, And whenever you cast a spell with mana value 5 or greater, draw a card. So it is just a great card draw engine, and it replaces itself when you play it. Next up, we have Outcaster Trailblazer. This is 2 and a green, and when it enters the battlefield, add 1 mana of any color. And then whenever another creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. So it is a 4/2 body, human druid that just draws us a ton of cards. You can plot it for 3, so you can get that mana on another turn and just put you over the top for maybe on turn 5 playing that 6-cost creature. Let's be honest, you have a bunch of ramp in this deck. You'll be playing 6-cost creatures on turn 3. Moving on now, I really have been trying to find a deck for this. I'm glad I finally found one. It's Monstrous Vortex. It's 3 and a green for an enchantment that reads, whenever you cast a creature spell with power 5 or greater, discover X, where X is that spell's mana value. So if you play this and then you play Apex Devastator, you're not going to cascade 4 times. You're going to get to cascade 5 times. So really cool ability in things that don't have cascade now gain cascade. A really cool card. All right, now we have Last March of the Ents. This is a sorcery. It's 6 and 2 green pips and says this spell can't be countered. Draw cards equal to the greatest toughness among creatures you control. Then put any number of creature cards from your hand onto the battlefield. So it's got a Galta type of effect. Also, it's going to allow you to draw a bunch of cards first. So if you have a 12/12 on the field already, you're drawing 12 cards. And then you get to play, of those 12 cards, any creatures from your hand. This is a crazy finisher. I love this card. And I like seeing it played as well. Now we have Osier Chasm, Deepest Growth. This is 3 and 2 green pips. This is another card I've been trying to find a place for a long time. It's a god 6/5 with trample. When it deals combat damage to a player, reveal that many cards from the top of your library. You may put a creature card and or land card from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom in a random order. So this is going to hit hopefully for 6. If you hit, even because it's got trample, you could hit for 4 or 5. And then you're going to be able to look on the top of your deck and play stuff for free. A really cool value engine. And then whenever it dies, you return it to the battlefield tapped and transformed under its owner's control. The land that you get from this is going to produce green mana, of course, which is going to be good. So it's kind of ramping away when it dies. Like, having this die is actually not bad. And then you just have to attack with a certain number of creatures to be able to flick it back into play as the god side. All right, now we have a new card. This is Season of Gathering, and this one's kind of gone under the radar. I think this is underrated. It's a better risk cards expertise. It's 4 and 2 green mana, so it's the same cost, except it says for the 3 pause, you get to draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. So there's a risk cards part, but then you get 2 more pause worth of stuff to do other things. You can do choose artifact or enchantment, destroy all permanents of the chosen type. So if someone's playing an enchantment deck, you just get to wipe their board on top of it. Or you can just do the 1 paw twice, which is put a 1/1 counter on a creature you control, it gains vigilance and trample until end of turn. Again, just another way to get around some of those little weenie, 1/1 cats. That is the end of the draw category. Let's take a look now at
Overrun.
Okay, this is the Overrun category. This is 2 things. It's 1, making sure that our 15/15s, our 12/12s, our 7/7s all are going to hit our opponents, going to give them trample so they're not blocked by little weenie 1/1 spirits. And it's also overrunning the board so that basically we have more creatures than our opponents can deal with. So the first card here is End Raise Forerunners. This is 5 and 3 green pips. Yep, that's right. 8 CMC for a board with Vigilance, Trample, Haste. And when it enters, other creatures you control get +2/+2 and gain Vigilance and Trample until end of turn. Really good card. Really expensive card, as far as mana goes. But because of Kona and our mana multipliers, these should be pretty easy to play out. Here's another example of one. Apex Devastator, it's 8 and 2 green pips, a total of 10 CMC. But this is the latter of the 2 that I explained. This is a Chimera Hydra. It's a 10/10, and it's got Cascade 4 times, which means that basically you are going to get 4 things off the top of your deck, hopefully, that you're going to play onto the board, and then your opponents are not going to be able to deal with. All right, moving on. Now we have Thunderfoot Baloth. I love anything with Baloth in the name. I don't know why, but it's 4 and 2 green pips for a beast that's got trample, and it's a 5/5, and it has the lieutenant ability, which means as long as you control your commander, Thunderfoot Baloth gets +2/+2, and creatures you control get +2/+2 and have trample. So everything will have trample and +2/+2. Very similar to the first card. This one's actually cheaper. It just has a requirement that you have your commander on the board. Moving on, we have Loot Exuberant Explorer. This is 2 and a green pip, and it's a Beast Noble 1/4. It's the newest loot, and it says you may play an additional land on each of your turns. I think every loot has that ability, but you can then pay 4 and 2 green pips to look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card with mana value less than or equal to the number of lands you control from among them and put it onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom in a random order. So as long as you have a ton of green mana, you're going to be able to play something for free that possibly costs more than 6 CMC, and then you're going to have leftover mana to do something else. So really good ability, really cool card. Next up, we have Quilled Great Worm. This is 4 and 2 green pips for a 7/7 worm with trample. And it says whenever a creature you control deals combat damage, that doesn't mean to a player, it just says combat damage. During your turn, put that many 1/1 counters on it. So if something swings in and it doesn't die, it's going to get exponentially bigger. Love this card. You may cast this card from your graveyard by removing 6 counters from among creatures you control in addition to paying its other costs. So as long as this is on the board and you're swinging in with one of your big creatures, it possibly could just constantly get rebounded because you're going to get at least 6 counters, and you could just play this again. I've not done it very much where I'm using that. Usually if you swing in once with this and your creatures are big enough, you don't need to bring it back. You probably have enough to win. All right, now we have a favorite of mine. This is Spinner of Souls. This is 2 and a green for a Spider Spirit, 4/3 with reach. All spiders should have reach. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you may reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card. Put that card into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So if something dies on your board, you're going to get a creature off the top of your deck to then play the next turn. This just ensures that you constantly have gas and you can keep putting that fire down on the table. All right, now we have Galta Stampede Tyrant. I don't really need to say much about this card. It's infamous. 5 and 3 green pips, so 8 CMC for a 12/12 with trample, and then when you play him, you get to play everything from your hand onto the battlefield. Really good card in any big green stomper deck. So that's the end of that category. Let's get on to
Payoffs.
now we move on to the payoff section. So this is all the cards we've been talking about all video. These are the giant stompers. These are the cards that are going to win you the game. And let's take a look at the first one here. It's Liege of the Tangle. It's 6 and 2 green pips. Elemental 8/8 with trample. And when it deals combat damage to a player, you may choose any number of target lands you control and put an awakening counter on them. Each of those lands is an 8/8 elemental creature for as long as it has an awakening counter on it. There's still lands. So even if this gets removed, those counters stay and they're still 8/8s. At this point, you probably have a mana multiplier of some sort, but let's say you still have 5 or 6 lands. Well, guess what? Now you have 5 or 6 8/8s, and you should win the game if you're able to untap with them. There is one problem with this, is that they become creatures. So if a board wipe happens, say goodbye to your land. So you have to be careful if you're going to put all these awakening counters on all your lands. Maybe wait until it's just you and another person one-on-one, and you know, or you're pretty confident that they don't have a board clear and you need some way to push through. Or maybe you just put it on a couple lands, but still having 3 8/8s is crazy good in a deck like this. All right, moving on, we have Vaultborn Tyrant. I love this card. It's very expensive money-wise, but I put it here because I think it works in this deck. It's 5 and 2 green pips for a 6/6 dinosaur with trample. And when it or another creature with power 4 or greater enters, you gain 3 life and draw a card under your control. When Vaultborn Tyrant dies, if it's not a token, create a token that's a copy of it, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. So it's very hard to get rid of. If you exile it, it's not dying, so that would be the best way to deal with this if you're looking for a way to deal with this. But a 6/6 dinosaur that draws you cards, this is a really good card. Moving on, we have Giant Adaphage. It's 5 and 2 green pips for a 7/7 with trample. And when it deals combat damage to a player, create a token that's a copy of it. So the first time you hit with it, guess what? You get 1/7/7. The next time you hit with both those, now you're getting 2 more 7/7, so that's a total of 4. And you can imagine as this kind of ramps out, it gets kind of crazy. And with your ramp in your deck, you should be playing this well ahead of turn 7. Just a really cool card. Now we have World Spine Worm. This is 8 and 3 green pips for a 15/15 worm. This is the highest stated card in this deck. It's got trample. It says when it dies, you create 3 5/5 green worm creature tokens with trample. If it's put into the graveyard from anywhere, you shuffle it into its owner's library. So if it's not exiled, guess what? It just gets shuffled back in, and you're going to get 3 5/5 worms. This is an awesome card. Yes, it's very expensive, but with Kona, hopefully we're playing it for free. Okay, now we're talking about Protean Hulk. This is 5 and 2 green pips for a 6/6 beast. When it dies, search your library for any number of creature cards with total mana value of 6 or less, put them onto the battlefield, then shuffle. So this card can be crazy in this deck, and there's not a ton of low-cost creatures, but there's enough to actually get a ton of value off of this. You could have this die and then go search for Loam Dryad, Ceruli Caretaker, Fanatic of Ronus, Incubation Druid, Armored Scrap Gorger, and then there's some 3-cost stuff if you really already had that stuff played out, which I don't think you would. But you're going to net a ton of mana on your next turn. You're going to be able to play a bunch of big stuff out of your hand. You've probably drawn a bunch of cards, and this has worked really well in this deck, even though there's not a lot of low-to-the-ground creatures. It is just an awesome card, basically, in any green deck, because you're going to get so much value out of it. So, Protean Hulk. All right, now we have a removal card. This is Titan of Industry. It's 4 and 3 green pips for a 7/7. This is from New Capenna, but it's a little weird. Elemental, reach trample. When it enters the battlefield, you choose 2. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. Target player gains 5 life. Create a 4/4 green rhino creature token. Put a shield counter on a creature you control. I love shield counters. They work really well against a lot of decks, but you would do probably a shield counter, and then one of the other ones, maybe you just create a 4/4. I mean, any of these options are great. Choosing 2 of them, a ton of value. So this is a very strong value engine. That's the end of the payoffs. Let's now take a look at
everything else.
Now it's time to talk about everything else, and I always put the disclaimer here. This category is about cards that did not fit into another category, or a card additionally that I wanted to give a shout out to. So the first one here is the Tarrasque. This is 6 and 3 green pips for a dinosaur 10/10, has haste and ward 10. So as long as it was cast, whenever the Tarrasque attacks, it fights target creature defending player control. So this is a really great card because 1, it's really tough to remove, and 2, it's a removal engine. A really great card for that reason. Next, we have Portal to Phyrexia. I mean, it's a 9-cost artifact that removes 3 things and then allows you to bring something back from the graveyard every turn. How's that not good? Yeah, literally it says when it enters, each opponent sacrifices 3 creatures, and at the beginning of your upkeep, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It's Phyrexian in addition to its other types. Moving on, now we have Terastodon. This is 6 and 2 green pips for a 9/9 elephant. And when it enters the battlefield, you destroy up to 3 target non-creature permanents. For each permanent put into a graveyard this way, its controller creates a 3/3 green elephant creature token. So you can kind of spread this around the board. You can target one person that's way ahead. Maybe just destroy creatures, but mostly you're going to use this to just kind of wipe out a lot of enchantments and things that are slowing, stopping you from winning the game. This is just a great card for a lot of reasons. Next up, we have Dawnglade Regent. This is 5 and 2 green pips for an 8/8 elk. When it enters, you become the monarch. So this is going to introduce the monarch into the game. As long as you're the monarch, permanents you control have hexproof. So this is giving you some protection. It's giving you extra card draw. It's going to be really hard to wrestle away the monarch from you. The only way is if they have flyers. That's probably a weakness of this deck. Not a lot of reach. You saw 1 reach creature. I don't know. I'd have to go through the deck to see if there's any more. All right, now we have Vivian Reed. This is 3 and 2 green pips for a Planeswalker. It's got 5 loyalty to start with. The +1 is look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card or land from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library. So this is going to allow you to kind of rummage through your deck. You can do -3, destroy target artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying. So it's got a bit of removal. And the -8 is you get an emblem, creatures you control get +2/+2, have vigilance, trample, and indestructible. So this is just a great value Planeswalker. That's why it's in this deck. It just provides a ton of value. A lot of flexibility, does a lot of different things. Just a great card for that reason. All right, now we have a favorite of mine since discovering it, and it wasn't for Jumpstart or Foundations, I probably would have never known about this card. It just didn't seem that great to me, but seeing it played and playing it myself, I totally understand this card now and just love it. It's Primeval Bounty. It's 5 and a green pip. Whenever you cast a creature spell, create a 3/3 beast. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put 3 1/1 counters on a target creature you control, and then landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, you gain 3 life. Again, this is just an awesome value card. So you play it out for 6 mana. Yes, it's very expensive. You don't get anything that turn, but every subsequent turn, you're getting value for free. Free value is what it's all about, guys. The Skullspore Nexus is next. This is 6 and 2 green pips. You're never going to pay that much because the spell costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. So if you have a 6/6, it's just 2 green mana. I don't think you can reduce the green mana, but just being able to reduce it to just 2 green mana is going to be awesome. The legendary artifacts, you can only have 1, but whenever 1 or more non-token creatures you control die, create a green fungus dinosaur creature token with base power and toughness equal to the total power of those creatures. So typically you would just want to see 1 creature die, but if you had multiple, you're going to get a giant dinosaur. And then on top of it, it's got 2, tap this, double target creature's power until end of turn. This card I think is underrated. I think this is an amazing artifact. It's just a great card in any big Stomper deck, and it's one that I've been trying to play in a lot of different decks. I think it's finally found a home here. All right, now we have an infamous card here. This is Vigor, 3 and 3 green pips for an Elemental Incarnation, 6/6 with Trample. If damage be dealt to another creature you control, prevent that damage. Put a 1/1 counter on that creature for each 1 damage prevented that way. So you have to remove Vigor before your opponent can do anything. This is a great protection card. Whenever Vigor is put into your graveyard, you shuffle it into your library. So this is just an awesome card. So many decks run this because it fits in so many different places. Now we have an instant. This is Smuggler's Surprise. It's 1 green pip with Spree. So it's an instant, says for the Spree cost. So for 2 additional, you get to mill 4 cards and you put up to 2 creature cards and or lands from among the cards milled this way into your hand. That's not very synergistic, but this is why it's in here. For 4 and a green, you may put up to 2 creature cards from your hand onto the battlefield. So for a total of 6 mana, you get to play 2 things. And our things, as you know from this video, are huge. So paying 6 mana for 2 things is a ton of value. And then last, it's got, for green and 1, it's creatures you control power 4 or greater, gain hexproof and indestructible. So if you just need a protection spell, then you could just dump this and gain protection for the turn, maybe stop a board wipe. So the flexibility on these cards are awesome. I think all the free cards are great, but this one works really well here. That's the end of the everything else category, and that's the end of the video. Again, as always, I appreciate you taking the time to take a look at this video, and if you could like and subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. Catch you in the next one. Peace.